What's up, guys? Welcome to the Honest Tattooer podcast, where we love tattoos. And this week we have one of our infamous, loved and hated critique episodes. What's up, Matt?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Pretty good. So this week we have some tattoos that we're going to look at from one of our listeners. His name is
Isaac Russell. He's one of our Patreon supporters.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Russell. And thank you so much for being brave enough to submit your work for us to look at. Every week, we discuss different topics, but every time that we've done a critique episode, reiterate the value and how important it is to have your work looked at by other people that you like the work, admire, etc., so they can help you get better. All of us, including myself, Matt, we get each other's, we show each other's work, drawings, etc., and we try to make it better. And if you don't have that within your community, within your shop, that's what we're here for. We're here to help you out and to help you get better and continue to grow. So we're going to look at some of Isaac's tattoos. He sent a lot of work. So we're going to pick some of different things that he sent. And we actually asked him what he wanted to get better at. And we're going to kind of try to really focus and touch those subjects today.
So before we move on, let's just make a note that Isaac is a Patreon supporter. And if you want to help the show, you can become a Patreon supporter as well. Just head over to patreon.com/HONESTTATTOOER and you can sign up to be a supporter. There's a couple of different tiers. The third tier is the tier where we accept all of our critique inquiries. Every tier supports the show, and we are super grateful for all of you who help support the show. There are two new people this week that we just want to give a shout out to, Steven Costa and Christian Rodriguez. So thank you guys very much. And thank you to everybody who supports.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. We love your messages. We love when you guys sent DMs to us, letting know how much you like the podcast. We appreciate that. But if you really, really want to show some love, become a Patreon supporter. We appreciate that more than anything. So without any more, let's get into it. All right. So to start off, let's start with this realistic tiger.
All right. So Isaac, in his notes to us, he kind of gave us a rundown of some of the things that he wants us to talk about, some things that he feels like he's kind of missing the mark on. And with his realism tattoos, he feels like composition is something that he is lacking on. And he wants us to kind of touch on to help him improve on how to lay out the design better, but more importantly, how to make it so that he can continue doing more realism pieces to create a sleeve and have everything kind of flow into one another.
So if we start off with this tiger, the first thing that just jumped at me was the placement off the rip. The placement of this tiger, just based on the size that it should be. If it was going to be where it is, if it was going to be up higher, I think it should be bigger. I think you could have just quickly change that by just moving that tiger down if you wanted to do that size. That way it gets framed a little bit better by the body part. So it feels a little small of where it's at. So making it even if it stayed right there, but if it was like 15% bigger, I think it would just fit that area a little bit better. And it's huge, especially when it comes to pieces and you're trying to create that like frame and have it be able to continue to another piece. If this was framed better, then you're eliminating a lot of that space that you feel like it's empty. That would be just like the transition to the next tattoo.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest no-brainer when looking at all of his work, was that everything was just too small to try to figure out how to make a sleeve out of all this.
Yeah.
So going on your placement, I think that, yes, you're 100% right that it needs to be bigger, but also I feel like it needs to be flipped, like a mirror image, like the flowers, the leaves, all those that are going right into this girl's crotch.
Yeah.
If those were on the other side of the tiger, it would flow naturally with the shape of her leg.
For sure. Agreed. And if I was doing this tattoo and somebody wanted this exactly, I probably would have moved it down lower. So there's some stronger, bigger flowers on closer to the kneecap, have it kind of go around the leg. And then you're creating more of a frame that fits the body part.
Right.
And I think that overall, then you'd have a more aesthetically pleasing composition that fits the body part that it's going in.
I don't know if the intention of this was to expand on and create a sleeve out of it. The way that it is right now is going to be very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
The way that the flowers are kind of drifting off and you have a lot of that negative skin in between all the leaves and everything, that's where you're going to run into your problems with how do I fill in all this space to create a sleeve. So just thinking about it, when you're designing your first piece, ask your client, what's your goals? What's your long-term goals? Do you want this to be a tattoo that stands alone, or do you want this to be a part of a bigger project? And if your client says, no, I'm thinking about doing my entire leg, or I'm thinking about doing my entire arm, when you frame out your composition like this, try to avoid doing anything that is going to be sticking out and like having these like shoots of leaves and shoots of little filigree stuff, because that's going to hurt you in the long run. Cool. Hopefully that helped a little bit on that one. It's funny too. I'm like really zooming in on my computer to see like what you're talking about too. You've got the printout right there. It's probably a lot harder for you to.
Oh, it's harder for me, but I still see it, you know, which is wild, you know? So guys, so you guys are aware. So right now I'm doing this critique basically on printing out this photo and just looking at it. I'm not looking at it on a digital form where I'm like zooming in like we always do, but these still these things really jump out at me by looking at them just like this. And I'm printing out the photo that you sent. So always remember that this is your portfolio, man, you know? So I'm judging you. I'm not even critiquing the way that you're displaying your work, but I am judging you by it. You know, I'm not critiquing it, but I am judging the way that you're showing me this tattoo. Like, you know, there's too much here other than the tattoo. Like, you know, even if you crop this down to this much, and look, I'm going to flip this over. This is all that I really need to see of this tattoo. Like, that's it. I know it's a leg. I see what it is. And then my eyes go towards the tattoo. That's it. So even little simple things like that. And if you've watched our previous critiques, we've talked about the importance of using a CPL lens. Something like this on your work, it would make a world of a difference. People, not only for yourself, you'll be able to see the smaller little intricacies of your tattoo, but other people will see your tattoo better.
Cool. Presentation is huge. Don't slack on that.
Don't slack on that. The quality of your pictures, the quality of your lighting, all that stuff really does matter.
Man, could we take a little sidetrack right now?
Yeah.
The amount of people that I see who hate on the CPL, saying, "Oh, you're doing it a service, or you're
creating unrealistic expectations or something like that." Some people think, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think so, man. I don't think so. I mean, there's a level of like, you know, you can use a CPL filter and it can increase the contrast of a tattoo very, very highly. And it's sometimes too much, you know, and it can make it look slightly unrealistic, but those are things that you can also tweak on the image after you take it. I mean, I've taken pictures with a CPL filter where the tattoo overall just looked too warm. Everything looked over the top, and you can just bring it down, you know, you can bring the lighting down if it looks too hot, etc. And by hot, it means like, you know, the white sections of the tattoo or of the picture look too bright. You can bring that down and it'll look a lot more realistic. So it just takes a little bit more editing. And I feel like,
oh no, don't say editing.
Oh my God, of editing the photo so it looks more like what it looks like in real life, you know, not altering the photo through editing, but just making the photo look better. So moving on to the next piece. So he also sent another realism piece, and it's a crow with a rose.
I picked this one because I actually like this one.
I like it too. And then there's things that I hate about it. If you're going to send this to me as a realism piece, don't do neo-traddy leaves. You know, you should have some realistic looking leaves.
Yeah.
You know, if that's what you're going for. For you guys that are looking right now, these leaves, they don't have perspective. As a leaf is moving back, it should look like it's moving back. They all look like they're just kind of sticking out of this rose, which is something that looks fine in a neo-traditional tattoo. Right. It works. But if you're trying to go for realism, it kills the realism part of it, you know? And that's the tricky part about doing realism, is that you really have to trick the eye in all of these ways, you know? So if you're trying to do realism, you got to think about that in every sense of the word, thinking of like, the light source that's on this bird needs to match the light source on the rose, which needs to match the light source on the leaves. If any of those things are off, your realism is out the window and you're more an illustrator, which is fine, you know, but if you're trying to really trick the eye into believing that this looks like a photograph or realistic, then that's going to be a challenge. I don't mind the peppery shading that you did on this tattoo. I think it's cool. And I like the little bit of texture that you did on the bird. I think it's nice. But for example, you did very little outlines on the bird itself, but then you have all of these outlines on the leaves, which takes away that sense of realism to them. There's different ways to shade leaves that can feel more realistic. And I would say get down on a piece of paper draw a few different styles of leaves and just figure out which one feels more real to you. And most of all, try to match that contrast. If you want to know what I'm talking about, I'll point it out really quickly. Look at the leaf on the bottom of that rose, you know, where the rose is overlapping that leaf, yet there is no shadow, you know, on that leaf. There is light hitting that leaf. That wouldn't be happening based on the light source that you indicated on the rose. You know, if there's like, you see that petal that is right above that, there's another petal above that that's creating that shadow. So you're telling me that there's a light coming from the top hitting that. But then if there was a light from the top, that bottom petal will be casting a shadow on that bottom leaf, plain and simple. So think about things like that. Once you match one thing, do them all. Sometimes this little mistake happens when people grab different references from the internet. You grab one cool picture of a rose and then you grab a cool picture of a bird, you put them together and you're like, oh, this looks sweet. It looks, at that point, if you work with an iPad digitally, it's really easy to then just, I got to make sure that all of these shadows are coming from the same place. You might have to add some shadows that aren't there, manipulate the light source a little bit more, but just adding that little level of effort will really bring your work up if you're trying to do realism. Doing that kind of shit, it's important even in other aspects of tattooing. Even if you're doing like neo-trad, it works still, you know, just a consistent light source on everything. It just looks better. It feels like, you know, I love looking at a neo-trad tattoo that has that sense of realism, but still looks like very well structured and everything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like that's where a lot of like the neo-trad that's leaning more towards Art Nouveau kind of is like that kind of realistic light source. Everything has reality to it.
Yeah.
But it has that bold outline, that kind of definitive, I don't know, style to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the hard thing about doing realism. You have to take out what you know out of your head. You're like, you know, it's like draw an apple and then you draw an apple that looks like every imaginary apple that everybody's ever drawn. But you have to like, no, draw an apple off a picture. You need to figure out what that apple looks like on that picture.
Yeah.
So it's all about training your eye to see subtle details on things. And that takes time. It takes effort and it takes practice. The best realism artists that I know, they all practice either making art that's realistic with colored pencils or with paint, but they practice in another medium or even with just, you know, charcoal or color or graphite pencils. That's not my style at all. It's not what I enjoy, but if that's what you want to go to, and I think from looking at the work that you submitted, I feel like you're still trying to find in which direction you want to go. And it's good to do a little bit of everything, but you should still apply the things that you're learning from each style into each one, you know? So if you're going to, you know, do this like shading that's peppery, that takes a lot of effort, a lot of skill, but I think just work on your mags, you know, just focus on your mags if that's what you want to do. Cause you're still doing traditional stuff and you're still doing like a lot of variety. So I don't know. I think that's something to think about.
Yeah. Going back on what you were saying with just like avoiding the things that you know what they look like and just focus on looking at the thing that you're drawing. A good technique to practice is to take the reference that you're looking at, turn it upside down, and now draw your image upside down. And it forces your brain to now look at the shapes as opposed to the object.
That's it. Look at the shapes, light, shadow. Don't look at what it is. Just look at the shapes and shadows. I do that a lot, even like with my own tattoos, you know, like I'll just turn it completely sideways. So I stop looking at the image.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to do with an iPad because you're like, oh, I'm going to just turn this thing, done. You know, but it definitely helps a lot. As far as this bird, I really like the bird, man.
Me too.
I really like the bird. Like the contrast on it is really nice.
And again, you know, what he wanted us to kind of focus on with his realism stuff is how do I turn this into a full sleeve? And I think you're doing the same thing in this piece as you did in the other one that we talked about, where all these leaves kind of jutting out are really hurting your ability to expand on this later smoothly.
Oh, for sure. Like if a lot of these leaves, like especially the ones that are on the top left side of the rose, you know, that would be a great spot to add another image right there. But then these leaves are kind of just going to compete with whatever you add there.
Yeah.
And,
but so, I mean, we don't know if that's what he wants.
Is what he wants or not.
So if this as a standalone piece, this is great.
Yeah, that's cool. I think like what's helped me to develop better flow is to always like, don't end the tattoo in just like a flat spot, you know, leave a little bit of transition. If I was doing this tattoo, like I would have added some sort of a skin break, you know, like towards the bottom, like to create like a flow, you know, some flow. So it's not just image. I mean, that's not everybody's cup of tea or how they want their work to look, but I probably would have drawn a little bit of flow lines, leave some negative space, added a little bit more of a background to it to be able to make the background a little darker and have all the negative space on that rose really jump at me. All right, let's move on to this Reaper.
All right, this looks like a second session, right?
Definitely a second session.
So with this one, I could tell he's leaving that kind of cloak open-ended to make it easier to flow into another piece.
Yes.
Which is good. What I think is missing here is you want that shape or that flow to move with the body.
Yes.
So right now it's kind of going in that way. Like if you think of your bicep, your tricep muscles, they're kind of moving down and forward. So this is kind of doing that, but I wish it were going a little bit more forward. It seems like too vertical right now, but I feel like that he's on the right path. Like that would be the way to do it right there.
Another thing that I see with that same area that you're talking about is how choppy that shading is ending. I don't know what size mag you're using, but I would definitely recommend for you to use a bigger mag with curved edges. I'm talking about at least, I'm saying 19 mag, you know, like a 19 curved mag for that big field. You can smooth that out so much and make it nice and fluid. It looks like you're using a smaller mag and really working hard to try to get it smooth. And it's just getting choppy and not smooth at all. So I would say use a bigger mag and think of your mags as different brushes, you know, and each brush is going to give you a different technique and a different effect. So using a bigger mag, you're going to get those nice large blends, nice large like whips if you're trying to get it more whippy even, you know, but you're going to get a softer blend and, you know, save your smaller mag for the details and things like that. Another thing about this tattoo is the contrast it's really high, but at certain points things are getting lost.
Yeah. His cloak, those highlights on the cloak are just too bright. It's competing with the bone.
Yeah. Too bright.
That black of the cloak, if you think of your value scale from 1 to 10, right? And this is a perfect example of how to do that. So your bones are going to be your lightest value and your cloak is going to be your darkest. So don't let them overlap. So if your black cloak is value 10 to 6, don't let let me rephrase that. If your bones are going to be value 1 to 5, don't let your value of your cloak go any brighter than 5.
Correct. Absolutely. Like something simple, like the inner part of the cloak, there's like a skin break in there, in that inner part of the hood, right by the hand that's holding the scythe. Where if that's a hood and that's inside and that's dark, if that was just darker in there, like, you know, no skin there at all to keep, you know, because it's the same value, you know, it's within that 1 to 5, like light shade, and it's in the inside of the cloak. So it's just competing with the negative space that's in the bones, the negative space that's in certain parts of the cloak and on the part that's on the shoulder of the skeleton.
I just want to reiterate what I was saying before, because I feel like I didn't get my message across too well. If you're going to separate your values from your skin or in this case, your bone and your cloak, determine I'm going to have value for my bone 1 to 5. I'm going to have my value from my cloak 6 to 10. Make that, even if you have to separate it on your actual station, you know, this drop system in my front row, 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, this is going to be just my bones. And then my other one, 5 drop, 6 drop, 7 drop, that's going to be my cloak. Don't cross contaminate those. Don't let your cloak value go into your bone value. Keep them separate so that you don't accidentally make one thing lighter or darker and compete with your other stuff.
Yeah. And I would love to know what are you doing for your washes? You know, are you an artist that is working solely off of black and water? Are you doing like a 3-drop system where you have like a light, mid, dark? Or are you doing one of those, you know, like I have like 10 ink caps, you know, where it's like a really long value system? I've known many artists that do it in very different ways and they will get very different results. But I think whatever you're doing is giving you this very kind of extreme where you have this heavy darks, not enough mids, and then in some pieces you've had really good highlights, like in the bird piece before, where it looks real bright where it needs to be. But here in this piece specifically, there's parts where I'm like, oh man, there's just little tiny tweaks where if like he did this, just another, and it looks like the sleeve is not complete yet, but I feel like you could go back in it and push some of those really fine light tones to get rid of some of the skin in this tattoo, so it really has more dimension.
Yeah. If I had to guess, just based off of the way that this looks, I would say that this is just black and water.
Black and water. Yeah, that's the same thing I thought. Yeah. I was like, man, it looks like, he's kind of fighting with it a little bit more.
What do you think about the composition of it overall?
Man, I'm going to tell you straight up, I fucking hate that backhand. I hate it, because I think it's such an important part of this design and it gets lost.
Yeah, you can't really see it.
You can't really see it. That backhand that's holding the scythe to me is very important. It's like a point of where it should look more. That's the part where it feels more dynamic. It has like, you can add the character of this skeleton or of this reaper. And I feel like it gets so lost. Either exaggerating the size of it a little bit bigger so you can see more of like that gripping. It looks like he's flimsily holding this scythe, know? It doesn't look like his thumb is gripping that thing. It doesn't look like the fingers are coming. Like it just looks too loose.
I'm trying to tell if the front hand is holding the bottom part of that staff.
I can't tell.
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell.
Or is it like, it's definitely not on a hip. You can't tell what it's on.
You can't tell.
And I don't know if that's just the angle of the design because it's wrapping a little bit or what, but it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I think overall the image is a little stiff. I think you could play around with, especially when you have like drapery like that, you could definitely make that flow a little bit nicer.
Absolutely. It part of this design reminds me of like a very classic Flash design that.
Like a Cherry Creek?
Yes.
Yeah.
It reminds you of that Cherry Creek kind of design, but like a little bit, like he did in his own take. He put a little bit more elaborate shading and stuff, but it reminds you so much of that design, which is super classic and super good. There's just little tweaks on this design that I think would look better and fit better, especially on just like the way that the drapery ends, the way that the hands, where they're at, the size of them, and little things like that will just make this tattoo look cooler. There's a amazing tattoo artist, Henry Lewis. He does sick ass reapers, just so sick, just killer reapers with so much just dynamic as fuck.
Yeah. I
would suggest look at his reapers, look what they're cool, just sick. And also if you want more of like a neo-traditional tattoo, fucking, Prim. Yeah. Took the words right out. Like Prim, look at Prim, dude. Fuck, it's so good. Yeah. Great inspiration for a more neo-traditional style. That's about it.
One thing I do want to add. So going back to finishing the bottoms of your pieces. So let me see, what did you write before? You wrote in the realism folder, which is where we're at right now. His concerns are mainly compositionally. I can't figure out how to end a realistic piece in a non-traditional way. They have no flow and they're very pieced together. I see all these guys who do realism and it flows easy from one image to the next. And I can't quite figure out how they do it. In my mind, the tattoo looks strange if it doesn't have a concrete end. So, and he did a little bit more also, but I just want to stop right there. So with this particular image, I think that if you're doing it right, as far as kind of leaving it open-ended so that you can allow another piece to flow into it, but you still want to have that tattoo look complete.
Complete, yeah.
This one, it's very obvious that there's something else going to be added to it, which if this guy doesn't come back for a couple of years, he's going to live with that unfinished tattoo for that long. So even if you're planning on doing something in addition to this tattoo, whip it out the way that it is, but clean it up and make it look more like a finished product.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Next up, we'll look at his traditional folder.
Want to go with the Black Panther?
Let's go for the Black Panther back piece. So I'll show you guys. I mean, this will be up on the screen, but look how it looks at for me. So you guys see what I'm seeing. It's cool, but let's look at it close up. This is one of those tattoos that if I saw this across the room, I'd be like, oh, that looks sick. And then I walk up to it and then I start picking it apart. So the first thing, man, with a Black Panther is that this black needs to be packed solid, my guy.
Right. And so this is what he wrote. In the traditional folder, I have a couple of concerns. The lack of directionality in my line work, it lacks something I can't quite figure out. And specifically on the Black Panther, I would say I'm struggling to pack the black solid on large areas.
That is true, my friend. And I think that goes back to what I just said about the size of the mags that you're using. If I feel like you're still using mags that are too small for some of these things that you're doing, which some people can pack them perfect, you know, with a small mag because they know how to work in small, tiny areas, you know, but I feel like just using a bigger mag for big areas will help you with that.
Yeah. People, I think you have the tendency to think, all right, I've got a big area to work with, so now I can use bigger motions.
Yeah.
If you've got a small mag using big motions, you're going to get this effect.
Yes. 100%. You know, if you're big hand motions, you're not going to saturate. Remember that, you know, your mag and your machine is moving at a certain speed and your hand movement needs to match that speed. And when you don't, you're going to get patchiness or you're going to overwork. It's going to be one of the two. So like, I feel like in your case, you're moving ahead without making sure that one section is actually fully saturated.
Yeah. Yeah. So all that to say, slow down.
Slow down. When doing big projects like this, which this tattoo doesn't look finished yet. And the only reason I say that is because there's still too much skin on this tattoo as far as like the nose, the teeth.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like the teeth still need to be filled in and the nose needs to be filled in.
Yep.
For this to feel complete. And it looks like it's a cover up a little bit, just because like if you look at the left ear, there's like some words or something peeking out of there. You see it?
Yep. The ears, man, I really want you to whip out that black cleaner.
Yeah.
You know, just as you're whipping, make sure each stroke, each whip is the same speed, same
direction.
Same direction. The left one, or I guess on her back would be her right side of her back, but in the image, the left side is a little bit cleaner than the right.
Yep. And in traditional work, try to make sure that negative space that you're leaving around things is very, very consistent. When you look at the chin of this panther, the shading is irregular, you know, like the negative space, that it's that border of negative space is very irregular. So, and if you look at the top of the head of the panther, like it's a thicker space, you know, and what makes a really, really good traditional tattoo is just a balance and consistency throughout the whole piece. So just to make this thing cleaner, you want to make sure that all the negative space on it is nice and even and consistent, and that all of your shading everywhere is nice and even and consistent, and it's going to feel better. And I think if you just apply that, that'll be better. The good thing that I'll tell you is that all of these things that we're talking about can still be done on this tattoo.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know, another session on this tattoo and you can clean it up and make it look proper, man. Absolutely smooth it out, make it better, make it more solid. And even just another lining session with a bolder line to clean it up, because some of these lines still look choppy.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to stencil your traditional tattoos the same way a realism guy would. Map it out. You know, if you need a line to say, this is where my whip is going to end, and you just whip to that spot so that you have a consistent edge all the way around, do it. No one's going to know that you have this map to kind of follow this guideline. If that's what you need to kind of make sure that everything is the same gap, the same skin break all the way around, and all of your whips and your blends start and end at the same spot, do it.
Do it. Absolutely. I mean, I've seen like traditional artists do that when they're shading flowers, you know, and then they'll do like a red line, you know, inside of a flower. Like that's exactly where my red shading is going to stop. But then you got to make sure that your fucking shading is fucking on point. And one thing that I see in your work, the shading is not meeting the line, like strong enough that the line's disappearing, you know, in certain areas where that's what you want. And you can see that clearly in the whiskers. Like look at the black of the whiskers and look where it meets the black of the panther. I can see where the line is, you know, and you want to really put that right up against it. You can see that around the eyes of the panther, like the black just doesn't go right up against the line. And honestly, dude, I call that lazy tattooing, bro, because you have eyes just like I do, and you're a tattooer and you're doing stuff that's cool. So you know when it's right. So I think it's easy to get carried away with giant projects like this because it's a lot. There's so much going on. So something that could be very good for you is to, when you do these big pieces like this, just work in sections. Be like, hey, today, dude, we're just going to focus on this little corner of this tattoo.
Yeah.
Don't think of like this session, I'm going to finish all the black. Be like, no, I'm going to finish all the black on this corner today, and making sure that that thing's solid and well packed, you know, and you're going to have better and cleaner looking tattoos. And at the end of the day, nobody knows how long this shit takes, man. They just see a good tattoo or not. And I know tattooers, man, that take forever, but they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
Straight up.
And the client's going to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, the client's more upset if you rush through the tattoo and it looks like it's choppy. They'd rather spend the money, spend the time, get it done right, and be proud of the work.
And now we're going to go to this tattoo, which I think is my favorite one out of the ones that you sent, which is this dog. It's a little hound dog. Yeah. The blue-eyed crying hound dog.
Yeah. This is a solid piece.
This is a solid piece, guys. Look at that. That looks cool. I like this tattoo.
And that's not in an easy spot.
No, not at all.
Right above the elbow like that? On the elbow?
Yep. But this tattoo out of the ones that you sent, I probably like this one of the most. It's like, has personality to it. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect.
No.
It feels good, you know? And like it has the right amount of balance of solid lines, enough black where the contrast is there, and then it has enough skin where it makes sense, you know? It doesn't feel too light. Some of the other tattoos that you sent, it felt incomplete, where like you did black shading, a lot of whips, but not enough saturation of anything else, where I'm like, it feels incomplete. It looks like the next session should be color or something.
Right.
Which it could be the case because we're just looking at photos, you know, but this tattoo feels good.
Yeah. You got a pretty consistent line work all around. The only thing that feels incomplete to me is the bone on the collar, a tag. I feel like that should be colored in, or, you know, something. Yeah. I agree. I think this is one of his strongest pieces that we've seen so far.
And the neck collar, I feel like there's a little saturation issues there, you know, like in the collar in the bottom, you know, because it's right on the elbow.
Yeah.
Because it looks like that's a red. It doesn't look like a brown. Or is it brown? I can't tell.
You have a weird printout. It's supposed to be red.
Right. It is supposed to be red.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it looks like it's not very, very well saturated. And then something that I think would have made this tattoo stand out even more, just a little pop of red in the back.
Yeah.
Little pop of red right behind the head, like on both sides. There's a little tiny bit right there. Little tiny bits of red.
Yeah, because think about how this is going to look 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of skin showing, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But then there's a lot of brown, which is pretty close to this person's skin tone also.
Yeah.
So having, that red or any kind of bright, vibrant color behind
it will just pop that tattoo right out, especially because this looks like a very tratty tattoo, which is awesome. It looks good, but just a little bit of red in the background, like a cool old like Sailor Jerry tattoo would do it. Like that, it'll just pop it, you know? Yeah. And even if you did like a little bit behind the head and then a little bit behind that bone, if you want to leave that bone negative, like you did, just like a little bit behind that bone, boom, tattoo's done, and it'll look solid.
Cool.
Super easy.
So I'm going to be the one being nitpicky right now.
Yeah.
I love everything about this tattoo except the highlight on the left ear. It's just straight.
It's straight.
It's so straight.
It's too straight.
Like you've got the folds going in one direction. The highlight should be following that same direction, which it's not. And then it's 3 folds, but 1 straight highlight.
Yeah.
So it looks that's the only thing to me that looks like it's unfinished right there.
It's true. I wish it had just a little bit more of that brown.
I said it already that the bone looks unfinished.
Yeah.
The only thing, but yeah, so that's the second thing that looks unfinished to me.
Yeah. But that's one of those things where it's like, when you're doing traditional work, about knowing when to call it finished and not to overshade it and to just give it just the right amount. But I think that out of the tattoos that you sent, this is one of the ones that I looked at. I was like, oh, this tattoo looks cool, man.
Yeah, cool.
We talked about it last week. Ink Maps app, incredible.
Yeah.
I used it last week. Man, amazing app. Ink Maps will help you make better choices with your colors. You can pick the ink brand that you use. You can tell them the colors that you have. And as long as you have a really good kind of reference or a drawing or a sketch, you'll be able to get better values using an app like Ink Maps that's going to help you make better choices with your color.
We have something to talk about in the after show that you just reminded me of.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I guess you guys got to tune in.
All right.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching. And like always, keep it real and keep it honest with yourselves.
Thank you guys. And once again, thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Again, Isaac is a Patreon supporter. He's the one who sent us all these images. So Isaac, thank you very much. Also, we truly appreciate it. You're giving us some content to make also. So everything is, it's a win-win for everybody here.
Hey guys, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Peace.